Hi, and welcome to the Mediatwits number 168. I'm Mark Glazer, executive editor of Mediashift.org. Today we'll be talking about cord cutting again. This time it seems to be accelerating, and last week big media stocks like Viacom, Disney, and Fox all took huge hits in the stock market with $60 billion of value lost in a couple days, all because it seems like cord cutting is really taking hold. Just about 1% of households dropped pay TV in the last year. Disney announced that possibly ESPN might be offered as a standalone streaming service, which would be a huge change when it comes to pay TV and the bundle and kind of the debundling that's going on. So this week we'll be talking about cord cutting as it accelerates and what it means for cable and the bundles. First, a word from our sponsor. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents can give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. And hey, podcasting fans, come to MediaShift's Collab Space workshop in San Francisco on September 12th at KQED with a focus on podcasting and audio innovation. Sponsored by the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute, Collab Space will include keynotes from Steve Henn of Planet Money and Aminatu So of Call Your Girlfriend. Learn more at bit.ly/collabsf and use the Collab20 code for 20% off your entry fee. So before we get into our discussion, I want to introduce our panel this week. We have Andrew Lee from American University joining us from San Francisco, Erica Laya from K&Cade, Janine Poggi from Advertising Age, Trey Williams of Market Watch, and our producer Jefferson Yan in LA. So it seems like something really big happened last week, at least stock market-wise, with the announcement from Disney and Viacom, some weak earnings, but still profitable, obviously, but some weakness that we really hadn't seen hit the stock markets before, especially with these numbers. Pay TV down 566,000 subscribers just in the second quarter, and as we said, 1% drop in subscribers over the year, and that number had been more like 0.1% a year. So that's obvious acceleration. It's still not, 20%, but it's something. Janine, what do you think about where cord cutting is today and where it might go in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely accelerating at a faster pace, but I think a lot of the reaction is a bit overblown. Second quarter tends to be a slow quarter for cable subscriptions because colleges are out, so you lose a bunch of the subscriptions there, and it's the summertime, so it tends to be not the most robust quarter to begin with. Having said that, it's definitely accelerating, but I think going forward, it'll be interesting to see how the operators and the satellite operators and the cable operators start using these slimmed down bundles to sort of keep people on and subscribed and bring in some younger consumers, perhaps, who are the ones either cutting the cord or not joining altogether. And you see things like Sling TV and Verizon working on their OTT platform and all of those types of things. And I think that's really where the key is for cable and satellite moving forward.
Right, because the present, you're still talking about they're making this. They're not. It's not like they're not profitable. They're doing well. But the problem is the future. If you think about millennial behavior, like you said, there's cord nevers, there's cord shaving. There's just kind of these tiny bundles. I mean, that's their worry, right? Is what the future brings.
Yeah, but it's not been proven out yet because we have this huge group of millennials who perhaps are graduating or in college and aren't subscribing yet to cable. But we're not seeing yet once they have families, get married, and that next wave, are they going to come back? And I don't think we have an answer yet. So it's sort of hard to predict right now because we don't necessarily know what that demographic is going to do once they move into the next part of their lives. So it's kind of up in the air right now.
True, although, we always talk about behavior in college and how that has an effect on you later in life. But you're right. I mean, once you're kind of in a family and there's multiple consumers in one place, there becomes kind of this family viewing, which is different.
Right.
Trey, what's your take on what's happening in the stock market, especially with this massive sell-off? I mean, the media stocks had done better than outperformed the market for years. Was this kind of a correction? I mean, it seems like Time Warner and CBS kind of bounced back pretty quickly. Do you think this is something long-term problem or just a short-term correction?
Well, I think looking at the all the sell-offs, like Janine said, it was probably a bit of an overreaction, and that's what a lot of analysts are saying. That I mean, over the course of we've seen this for a while that paid TV subscribers are dwindling, and it just seemed that now investors realized it and decided that it was they had too much, and they decided to get out. So they panicked a little bit, but I think like you said, Time Warner bounced back. A few of the others have bounced back, and really not all of them are down so much as they were that last week. So I think they'll bounce back and start doing a little bit better. But it's in the long term. I mean, obviously we'll see subscribers continue to leave pay TV subscriptions. It's just about what some of these companies are able to do moving forward with their bundles, with their skinny bundles, or with their OTT offerings.
What do you think about millennial behavior? I mean, what do you see happening as far as like cable bundles? Is it something that millennials are going to eventually come to, or do you think once you kind of haven't got the bundle, why bother?
I don't know. I think from my perspective, I think a lot of millennials grew up in the household with these bundles, so they're definitely used to it. And that's something that they latch onto. Of course, going through college, in their early 20s, yeah, they don't really have the means to pay for these big cable TV bundles, so they don't necessarily have them. But I think I could see once they, get later on in life, definitely coming back in some form or another, whether, that be the traditional pay TV bundles that we have seen. Not completely sure. Yeah.
And Eric, what do you think about what this means for Netflix? Obviously, their stock is up 147% this year. They're adding subscribers. It's all roses and just nothing bad, right? But there's so many streaming services. I mean, how many streaming services can we afford, really?
We probably can only afford one or two. And I think that the comment before about people leaving pay TV is not necessarily accurate. People aren't going to leave pay TV; they're just going to pay somebody else. And the value of a bundle will still be there. I mean, by the end of this year, there'll probably be a dozen different pay TV OTT services that are some sort of aggregation play. Netflix, Sony, Amazon, probably Apple. HBO with where they're going, and then you have direct services, CBS and others, and we're not going to carry 12 different subscriptions to a bunch of different services. So you see Hulu, Amazon, Netflix all trying to differentiate with unique programming, and you see them all trying to complete their libraries as well, be some sort of completist service. You see news today like Sesame Street going to HBO, which is fascinating. It shows that Netflix is really scaring the pants off of HBO. And the investment around kids' content and content beyond kind of prestige traditional Emmy-winning programming is, there's a lot of demand for that content. So HBO is now trying to create a more complete, well-rounded service that would appeal to people paying direct. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's been a 10-year journey that we've been watching. It's been clear that TV was going to follow what had happened to other media, music, newspapers, and now it's only a question of who the winners are going to be and what the models are going to look like.
What about ESPN? I mean, going this hey, we might go over the top. Was that in 5 years? So what is that?
That's basically we're ready to. There's a lot of media companies that are ready. The NFL has a full subscription product overseas, like in season, in game, live and on demand. It's available to armed forces and people in other countries that you can't get here. Everybody's ready to turn on a direct service, when the business dictates it, and so if the fees that ESPN is seeing from the traditional MVPDs start to drop off, they'll have the option to go direct. I was surprised HBO moved as quickly as they did. I think the interesting story and what you saw reflected in the financials last week is what happens to the middle class. And we're going to see a vanishing middle class of TV providers, and those companies not at the high end, companies that aren't
You're talking
HBO.
about small networks and things like that.
Yeah, or traditionally big like cable digital tier networks. I mean, on the low end, you have news and reality and non-narrative programming now coming from YouTube, MCNs. You see it coming from other sources, and on the high end, high production value content that requires big budgets. You see that from traditional sources. But these guys in the middle, the Scripps, A&E, Discoveries of the world, Nickelodeon, Viacom, like you are seeing it there. They're going to have their lunch eaten, and could Tastemade be the Food Network, of 5 years from now? Maybe. What Vox, Vice, BuzzFeed, where do these new companies go without the traditional subsidy from MVPDs?
Good question. Andrew, do you think this puts the content providers in the driver's seat right now to some extent, as far as, there are so many distributors, there's all these, if we have 12 different streaming services that are kind of battling it out, does that help them in some way, all the content providers?
Well, I mean, I can only go from kind of what I see with my kids, right? And, when we talk about user experience, what delights you, people talk about what delights you, and other than McDonald's, when they see the Netflix logo up there, that's what delights them. There's really nothing else in the TV sphere that delights kids than saying, whoa, that Netflix logo's there. I can choose whatever I want when I want it on my iPad or on the screen.
And a lot of kids' content, too, with like DreamWorks. They made a deal with DreamWorks a while ago.
That's right. So for kids, they couldn't care less if it was a Disney or a DreamWorks or whatever. They just know the Netflix brand as the entry point to what they want to watch. And that's really powerful, and as you said, that's why other folks are kind of scared of how big and influential Netflix has become in this area, right? And I think the ESPN move is really kind of the other shoe that dropped, right? Everyone was waiting for HBO to be unbundled and go their own way. ESPN now, if they're thinking about it, that is the other big part of that monolithic cable package that has been, suddenly stripped away. And, as we've seen, as Eric mentioned, then suddenly, all these people who are paying for that cable bundle are no longer subsidizing everyone else's sports watching with the ESPN fees. And now each of those individual channels has to justify itself, which is why I think in the long run we might just see the cable bundles go the way of newspapers, and that you're going to have to think about the free newspaper model. And, we're already seeing this, is that when you threaten to cancel your cable/internet from a company, they just will say, wait, don't cancel the TV. We'll give you the TV. If you're going to subscribe to the internet, we'll give you the TV. And I think that's probably going to be the norm going forward, is we'll give you the other channels that are not ESPN and HBO for free, because we're just going to have to tell those channels we're getting more eyeballs, even though we're not charging people for that.
Janine, you want to jump in?
Yeah, Eric made an interesting point before about saying, how many subscriptions can we pay for? And, one or two. And he's right. Like, we're not going to pay for dozens of subscriptions, which partially makes me feel like the cable bundle in some form continues to hold some value, because if you look and you take ESPN by itself, we have no idea how it would be priced, but you have to imagine it would be on the higher end of these OTT bundles. If you just take that, and that, if that's the same as HBO, that $15 a month, that's $30 right there for just 2 channels. And for some people that might be fine, but for a lot of other people, they want more options for $30, $60 when you start factoring in all of these other subscriptions. So in that respect, I think that there is something to be said about perhaps different bundles and these slimmed down bundles or a different way of packaging things. But to go completely a la carte in that way, I think would be really hard for a lot of consumers. So, and I'm just looking at it from, my viewing habits, friends' viewing habits. I think, when you have a family of a husband and a wife and children, you need more options than, 3 or 4 channels.
Yeah, the pay TV bundle, like from the traditional providers, is still the best bargain around. If you watch a lot of TV, it's still a great value. I think the question will be who you pay for that bundle. And I think what people have responded to with Netflix and HBO is the experience. It's that cross-media, frictionless experience. Things just work. It's easy to find. It's easy to discover things. There's no commercials. The quality overall of discovery and everything is really tight. Comcast actually has a great set of digital products that they've held back in bringing out across all of the devices that these other services are. It would be interesting to see if they in particular, they've come out with their skinny bundle. They've got a full bundle too. They could come out with and go out of market at some point if the apocalypse was near. And it'll just be interesting to see. Like they're in a classic, that company in particular, classic innovators dilemma, where the question is just when do they make the call to cannibalize their own business and move into this next wave?
Yeah. Trey, question for you. Do you think, we've seen there's now 400 original shows out there, versus like 280 a number of years ago. I mean, are there too many shows right now? I mean, are we kind of inundated? Like, how do you decide what to watch when you got like all these options? Not only, traditional media, you've got the new original streamings and, Vimeo has content, YouTube has, it just seems like there's too much.
Yeah, I feel like as long as they're making money, there are probably not too many shows. I know for me in everyday life, I feel like someone new that I talk to every single day is watching a different show that I've never heard of or that I've heard of and never watched, and there's just so much stuff out there, and they say, oh, it's good, so you go and you try to find it and you watch it, and then you get hooked. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of content out there, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the consumer, is the winner because they have so many options to choose from. And I think that plays off of what Janine and Eric were saying earlier with all of the people want all of the options that they want. They don't want to have to pay for all the stuff they're not using, but the Bachelorette and the Bachelor and all these other shows that they are watching on a day-to-day basis, they still want to be able to watch those.
What's really interesting? The comment of the 400 or so shows out there, but like, what is the marketing that's going on for these shows? And like, do you even know sometimes, like, if AOL has a new show, where it is and when it's available and where you can find it and all of that? Like, I think that in and of itself was like the marketing going on for some of these shows on these MCNs and stuff. A couple of people might find it, and some of them become really huge. There's a whole lot of content out there that like no one would even know exists.
Yeah. And what's a show? Like,
right.
There are actually millions of shows now, right? And that's a really interesting, different dynamic than we've ever had before.
Yeah, because the form factor of what a show is, and we thought, well, there's the half-hour comedy, there's the hour drama. I mean, that's just being changed. Just when you look at something like, even House of Cards, where it's like one episode's 43 minutes, and next one's 56 minutes. It's just, whatever. It's not really. I mean, just the shape of TV has really changed.
The entire creative process is different in terms of what, length, and it brings an interesting point, for us looking at commercial loads and where that fits in. When you have like a new process, a new creative process, whether it's the length of shows, are you going to throw in a 30-second commercial into a 7-minute show? Like, these new ways of doing things, I think, is also making it interesting for how do you monetize it, and where does, advertising play a part in it?
Yeah, Andrew, what do you think about that as far as advertising goes? Because, as these affiliate fees became, a big part of, ESPN's money and all these other networks, advertising was not the biggest. What happens to advertising in a world where there's, Netflix, where there's just no ads?
Well, I think Eric and Janine know the metrics better than I do, but I think the number of ad minutes has been expanding for a lot of shows, right? To the point where it goes from 7 to 10 to 12, and it's starting to creep, and they have to be more imaginative to kind of cover that up for the consumer so that we don't realize we're actually expanding those. Is that right, Janine?
Yeah, I mean the amount of stuffing going on, big culprits like Viacom that are just like throwing in so much more commercial time into their programming and like cutting off the credits to fit more commercials in and all of that. Like, it's become a little bit absurd at this point.
Yeah, and ads at the bottom, during the programming, and, obviously tie-ins and, commercial content right in the content itself, too.
Yeah, well, the ad business is changing as well quite a bit. You've got this big shift happening, called programmatic advertising, where what we've seen with traditional web advertising is now coming to TV, whether it's video across different devices or even linear TV itself, where measurement, ordering, placements are all being automated. And brands are able to control that a lot more than they ever could before, and that's giving rise to more measurability, better formats over time. So, I think a lot of this messiness right now with the stuffing is an anomaly of kind of the time we're in right now with this change, and that will resolve itself over the next few years.
I'm really, really excited to actually see who comes up with the new ad model. Like, does Sling TV come out with a really cool way to sort of advertise in their OTT service? You have so much data that's powering this, and there's so many different opportunities to target and to be a little bit more creative with advertising than what TV has traditionally done in the past. And I think whoever's front and center and out with that new ad model would be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange that when you're on Hulu, you see the same commercials 100 times. I mean, it's not targeted, it's not interesting. It's obviously it's forced down your throat, so it doesn't feel right, really. Yeah, Andrew, any other thoughts about where you see kind of this model going as far as cord cutting? I mean, do you think it's going to be a mix of people who are going direct to the channels and some skinny bundles? I mean, where do you think it might land in the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the observation you had before in terms of habits being formed at the college age level and people kind of sticking to that, or that being the principal way they interact with stuff. I guess the only real saving grace is like college football, right? When these kids are, hooked to their teams and want to follow their university teams, or even people who don't go to college but want to follow this. College football still has kind of a life in it that still kind of keeps the old guard in place, or the old arrangements in place, because they sign long-term deals, they have exclusivity agreements, they're very regional in terms of their interest. But other than that, it's hard to see a lot of silver lining on the old models continuing. So in that sense, I think the number of folks, we already knew this, about 5 or 10 years ago, the number of folks graduating from college who really didn't watch much TV and stayed that way were already huge, and I think that's just going to continue going forward.
Yeah, Eric, what do you think about the idea of, you talked about sports and how NFL can just push the button and be the NFL network, but then we've got this thing with, MLB, takes the NHL, and now they're working on their digital stuff. So is there a chance we might have some sort of just sports streaming network where basically, you pay one price and you get all your sports?
Called ESPN, maybe.
Well, and Fox has a lot too.
Yeah. I mean, people have a lot. I think the dynamic there is really the direct versus the aggregation, with ESPN having an aggregated model, or Fox or other providers, versus a direct model where you're buying directly from the leagues, like you saw with MLB. You see a little bit with the NBA. You see with the NHL. I mean, that MLB story is interesting, just on the technology side, really outside this dynamic of what happens to TV business models, in that coming out of their media business, they created this fantastic technology company that now powers HBO, WWE, NHL, and other companies, entertainment as well as sports. So, and they're going to spin that out into its own company. So that's interesting. But a lot of it's just the big contracts that are there. The NFL multi-billion-dollar DirecTV relationship, the sponsorships, the TV rights that are there. As that changes, if that gets smaller, the next round of rights, if people come to the table with less money, that will change. But realistically, if the DirecTV rights were up this year, I think still got a few more years ahead of it. If that were up this year, we'd see Amazon in it, we'd see Netflix in it, we'd see Apple in it, Google, all going after the NFL rights, and there's no reason that couldn't go to another provider with bigger pockets. If ESPN were on the skids, I think it is in the end it's another aggregation play, and who gets big fast. Maybe MLB creates a new bundled league direct service. That would be really interesting. I wonder what the economics would look like. I'm also waiting. I think the elephant not in the room is Apple, and what happens with Apple TV as that opens up and that product gets improved.
Yeah, the NFL on Netflix. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, Netflix doesn't have live right now. What happens when they turn on live? For events, it's crazy.
Good point. Well, thanks a lot for the discussion, guys. Appreciate you joining us. I want to thank our panel: Andrew Lee at American University, Eric Elia at Kincaid, Janine Poggi at Advertising Age, Trey Williams at Market Watch, Jefferson Yen, our producer. You can catch us each week on the Mediatwits at mediashift.org and follow us on Twitter at the Mediatwits. Our past episodes are on SoundCloud and YouTube, and if you enjoy the show, be sure to review us on iTunes. We'll catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.